our commissioner.
Okay. Dear Heavenly Father, we just lift Bobby Mitchell to you and her family, Father. We just pray for healing in every way, physically, mentally, emotional. And through this journey, there's so many people come together and just show love on her. And we just pray for their hearts right now, just covering them peace as they are preparing the memorial service for Bobby's husband, Fred, who is an amazing, sweet father, husband, and great man in the community, loving the Lord. And so we just know that you have good things in store for this family. You turn all things into good for those who love you and serve you according to your purposes. And we just thank you for your mercy and grace beyond our understanding, especially for the Mitchell family. It's in Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Shalom Shabbat. Thank you so much, Elena. We have an exciting show today. We have a wonderful guest that everybody wants to have in their events and on all their parties and stuff. But we are lucky to have him here with us today. Elena, I'm going to introduce this amazing gentleman because I think I can pronounce his name. I'm going to throw it out there. Okay?
All right. Well, you go ahead.
We have, and please tell me if I do this incorrect, you tell me, okay?
I will.
All right. Mr. Sanjay Narayan. Did I say that correct?
Narayan.
Narayan. Oh, did I say Sanjay?
Close.
Okay.
Yeah, you did. Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much, Sanjay, for being here today with us. I know you took time off to be in this show, and we appreciate you very much. And wow, this is an exciting day because you're a young attorney and you are a Plano attorney. You were born in New York, but raised in Plano.
That's right.
Oh my goodness. Well, tell us all about you.
Thank you so much for having me today. And it's beautiful prayer. I don't know the commissioner personally, but from what I heard, it's such a tragic story. So yeah, we lift her in prayers. Yes,
Thank you.
definitely.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me as well today. It's a privilege and an honor to be here today. Yeah. So my background is I'm an attorney here in Dallas. I grew up in Plano, as Alexandra, you mentioned. I was born in New York. Founded the Republican Club at Plano West too long ago at this point.
I remember that.
Went to Duke for undergrad. And while there, I interned for Senator Cornyn on the Hill, went to Penn for law school thereafter, worked in New York as an attorney, a big law firm, and then convinced my wife to move here in 2017 and have been active politically since. Governor Abbott appointed me to the Texas Radiation Advisory Board in 2019, and I'm on some local and city boards and also involved in groups that push for meritocracy like Color Us United and others. So I know we'll get to those topics. So
oh yes, we are. That's been one of the things that I am so excited about. You're my cup of tea today.
I appreciate that.
Hey, well, that's exciting. So, Sanjay, I'm curious. I know that you're well accomplished professionally, and I just met you, but I understand that you've been serving the community and just volunteering your time and your talents along with your fellow residents in the community. What drove you to start to do that?
I think it's always been an interest in the effect that people can have on their communities and a way to give back. You know, I've always had an interest in policy and kind of legal and regulatory issues. An opportunity to serve on the UP Legislative Committee in the City of University Park has been a terrific experience. And I'm appreciative to the governor for appointing me to the Radiation Advisory Board that I mentioned. That board oversees the use of radiation in the state, including for medical and research purposes, but then also our nuclear power plants and energy reliability and an unapologetic defense of oil and gas, fossil fuels, but then also the importance of nuclear power and really how this country and this state, frankly, have gotten off track by pushing unreliable weather-dependent source of power. You can see the impact like what we had during Winter Storm Uri 4 years ago when half the state lost power. So those are the types of issues where I feel like I can make an impact and give back. So it's really been important. And then, you know, continuing, I've got 2 young kids. And so contributing in a way that I can leave a legacy for them with a world that I want them to inherit, I think is so important. And that's that really drives the interest in public service.
That's good.
Well, can you tell us a little bit about your wife?
Sure. Yeah, she's more accomplished than I am. She's an attorney. She's a partner, Amy, at Hunt and Andrews Kurth, and she does private equity and fund formation. So much more interesting work than the litigation work that I've been doing in my career. And she's incredibly accomplished, an amazing mom to our two kids. Nina, my daughter, is 4.5. I can't believe the time has already passed. And then my son, Nishant, is 3. And they're a joy to be around. So that's my family and my
Busy dad.
I am, and they keep me on my toes, but it's a privilege. Nobody can prepare you to be a parent, but once you are, it's the greatest joy.
It is a great. So did you go to school in Plano?
I did. I went to high school in Plano. I went to all the public schools as they were being built, and at the time, and then Plano West is where I graduated from.
My husband graduated from Plano West years ago. That was an interesting. Plano guys were excellent.
No,
I was married 30 years. I'm a widow, but I can tell you, Plano was always in their mind. It's an amazing town, and I understand it's #1 to live in. That was,
Yeah,
but the
it was a great place to
yes,
grow
well,
up.
they just came up with an article, and then Plano is #1. It's a less stressful city. The city is unbelievable.
Yeah.
It's amazing. So tell us a little bit. Can you just tell us a little bit about your background, where your family comes from, and what do you see of our country since you were born here? But what is your background?
Yeah, no, my parents immigrated to this country in the 1980s. My dad came here first, and effectively the reason he came is because he took from India. He took one of the standardized tests, which would have given him placement in the university system, and they told him, because India had, and they still do, a pretty strict quota system based on your caste. They told him that they couldn't give him admission because he had the wrong last name. They said that if he was willing to change that they would give him the placement that he had earned based on his scores. And it was that day that he said, no, I'm done with this. I'm going to go to a place where I can be valued for who I am and the work that I do. Came here, studied at Baruch in New York City, and then my mom came over 6 months later after they got married, which just, they followed the legal process to come into this country because they valued the system of laws and regulations that we have in this country. And really the reason they came here is because of America truly is a shining city on a hill, and they believe that. And that's why they decided to come here and make a family. And, my dad's work brought us here to Dallas, and we've been here ever since.
What part of India are you from?
My dad is both my parents are from South India.
South India.
My mom grew up in Bombay, which is now Mumbai. And my dad grew up in Madras, which is now which is called Chennai. And then also Kerala, which is a beautiful coastal state in Southwest India.
Wow, what an exciting life you've had so far. Do you have brothers and sisters?
I'm an only child.
Me too.
I'm an only child. My wife has a sister, and then of course I got the 2 kids. I did have a dog though growing up, so that'll be my.
Well, you need to get another dog.
I do.
Okay.
I do.
We got plenty, right? We rescue. We
wonderful.
Fantastic.
Yes.
Well, tell us a little bit. So you got involved. You went to school. You graduated from Plano. Where did you end up going to college?
I went to Duke.
Duke, and then I see that you're also you have let's see, Duke University. So you did not study here in Texas at all?
Not for college.
Not
For
college.
high school, I did. I went to all public school, and then for college, I went to Duke. Graduated in 2009, and then went to University of Pennsylvania for law school.
For law school, Pennsylvania, huh?
Same school as our president.
As our president,
Yeah.
yes, that's very interesting. And you got involved. It looks like you got involved in our country, and you decided that you loved it very much, and now you're in a different phase of our country. So I'm just going to ask you a very simple question. So far, being that you have India and you have the United States, how do you see our country moving forward?
And I think we're really at an inflection point. I think it really depends on kind of the pathway we go. And this last election was a bit of a mandate, but it was about a 1.5 point mandate and an electoral landslide. But still, it remains to be seen kind of the direction we choose to go in. Our country was founded on the ideals of freedom of speech, due process, equal protection, right to self-defense. And then yet you see just this week, yesterday, that there are judges in this country who are allowing illegal immigrants to abscond through back doors to avoid arrest. So we still have this kind of idea that there are these kind of secular fads that are worth undermining the principles that undergirded and founded this country. And it really remains to be seen how much focus and effort we put on educating people in this country, the younger generation, but all of us, about the importance of those founding ideals, why the rule of law is so important, and that coming to this country legally and assimilating and acclimatizing yourself to the values of this country is so important. My parents immigrated to this country, and I know your grandparents or your parents came here as well.
My mother was first born here. My grandparents come from Germany and from Russia and all the Romania and all those areas. So.
One of the things that's so fascinating is if you talk to an immigrant or a first generation, you'll really get the sense of appreciation and love for this country, more so even than many people who are born here.
Yes.
They don't really appreciate what it means, how life is different in other places. And it's really that aspirational ideal of what America still is that I think gives me hope, and I think gives all of us hope that we can continue to be.
Well, I'm a legal immigrant myself, and I waited years, and I'll tell a quick story. People don't understand. Before the 1980s, the policy in the United States for immigration is you have to prove yourself to be a contributing citizen for the United States before they grant you a work visa. And part of when I was applying for work visa to stay here, and I already had an employer, and they would sign all the paperwork. But my attorney had to place an ad in the classified with my job description in there. And within 2 weeks, if just one American would apply for that job, my work visa would not be granted. Mm-hmm. And that's how serious they look at it, that as a foreign, or resident would not take away an American citizen's job. And I experienced it, and I respected that. Right. And I was able to have a work visa granted because I speak foreign languages and with the work experience and education that I have. But today, anyone can cross the border illegally without a visa and then collect unemployment and welfare entitlement,
all the benefits.
And there's nowhere else in the world that would happen.
That's right.
Except the United States. And so here we are expected to have taxpayers to pay for that.
I mean, that's the way the system should work, right? The system of immigration into a country should operate for the benefits of its own citizens first. So that's people who are wanting to come here should demonstrate the requisite skill, the ability to be self-sufficient, and also that they will fully adopt and assimilate into our values. And if you do that, America is singularly unique. There is no other country in God's green earth that would accept someone from abroad and treat them as a full-fledged equal. You're equal to people who've been here for generations and bloodlines before you, and you're the same. You're an American, full stop. But you have to pass those thresholds. You've got to demonstrate the ability that you can be self-sufficient, that you want to be here, that you respect our laws, and that you assimilate. And what better way of telling whether you really value being an American than whether as your first act in this country is to agree and follow the legal process that's set forth for you, wait in line, do it the right way, or abscond, come here illegally. If you come here illegally, you should be shown the door. There's no reason why we should undermine the system of legal immigration, which has real benefits to the country, by allowing these type of side door entries. It's unacceptable, and it's really been a problem. And what it does is it hurts the system of legal immigration.
Yep. You're listening to Alexandra Friends. Thank you so much. Look us up on Alexandra Friends on Facebook, YouTube, and any other social media that you might use. Please sign up and give us a little check, because we really need your voice heard. We are heard on any social media platform. So thank you so much for listening to Alexandra Friends this morning and watching us live. Well, I want to thank our little intern producer, Andy. He's doing a fabulous job. So thank you so much, Andy. So let's come back to Mr. Sanjay Narayan. Sanjay, there's a few things that I've been having on my mind, because I started this program when I went out. I wanted to talk a little bit about meritocracy,
yeah.
Meritocracy, okay? Most people don't understand what that word is. because we're so used to, in our country, we've developed a way of doing business of not by merit, but what you look like or what you think you look like or what people, they call it DEI or DIA or whatever you want to call it. But let's talk about that particular word in the merit. What do you coming from? You're an Indian gentleman background, you're an American, but what do you think about that?
I think it really just goes back to the founding principles, which is that this country was founded by people who, by their own grit, fought to create a free country. And then after the Civil War, because people had been enslaved, Black Africans in this country had been mistreated for so long, we passed the 14th Amendment. And it's very clear what it says, is that everyone in this country is entitled to due process and the equal protection of those laws. That means it's illegal to discriminate on the basis of race. And we passed the Civil Rights Act. We had people marching in bridges across Selma. We had soldiers die on the fields of Gettysburg. The blood, sweat, and tears of this country has fought to bring us to a place today where the laws in this country mandate that everybody be treated equally. And we all have different capabilities and abilities. Some people are tall, some people are short, some people are strong, some people are weak. And we appreciate those differences between us because that's what makes us individually unique. But it's not to create a playing field where everyone has an equal outcome. It's the equal opportunity to succeed that really is the basis of meritocracy. And somewhere along the line of the last 70 to 80 years, it's really become twisted that somehow we should level the playing field, meaning we have equality of outcome, but not based on your merit and what you can contribute in your work or education and your schooling, but based on what type of demographic characteristic on a check mark that you're able to satisfy. And that's not how you excel as a country.
Amen.
We need to bring back a culture of excellence, of work ethic, of discipline. And the only way you do that is by telling people that if you work hard, that you play by the rules, you'll be successful and you'll be judged based on what you can contribute. And that's how we bring back this country and continue to keep it a shining city on a hill.
You're so correct. And I think that's what we're finding in universities right now and throughout the country. And I think we have a precedent that decided that this is the way you should run the country, by merit.
That's right.
And if you don't understand that, then we have an issue. And it's becoming an issue that is controlling our country because now I can tell you, if I walk into a building, they judge me by my color. They don't judge me by my what I'm up here. They judge me that I'm a Jew, not what I'm here. So what's happened? How did we get to this level? How did we get? Do you have an idea?
Yeah, I think what really is, I think we can trace it back to like 30, 40 years back. Over the last 50 years or so, there's been a steady decline in publicly at least. And some of it has arrested and starting to move back in a better direction. But there's been a decline in organized religion and people ascribing to a particular faith, whatever that might be. And I think what happens is, Blaise Pascal said it hundreds of years ago very well, but in our hearts, there's a God-sized shaped hole. And it's just a question of what is going to fill that. And for those of us who are religious, it's God and family and country. But for those who are not, you still have a belief and a yearning for belonging into a group because we're human beings, we're social creatures. And into that vacuum, too often what seeped in is kind of these artificial, secular, left-wing type of artificial beliefs that give people a sense of meaning and purpose start to substitute for the real meaning of life and what it means to progress and have a family and believe in something bigger than yourself. And I think it's really derivative of that strain of that culture, that having people judged on their external characteristics gives them a reason to be forceful in pursuit of a particular objective. Because if you allow that everyone has individual strengths and weaknesses, then you have to allow society with the chips to fall where they may. But if you really believe that everything should fit proportional, then you can advocate that something is discriminatory or something is not. And it gives you like a real purpose to fight for. And I think, honestly, it comes down to that. I think if we can reinvigorate a sense of purpose in people's lives, they will lose track of these kind of side issues and really focus on what can empower themselves and the country and our state as a whole.
And I have to take a little step further. I think one of the biggest issues that we've had is we've never have made anybody responsible for these acts.
Mhm.
You know, we let it go. And I think that this is a very, discrimination is horrible. But when you start having it in the schools
Mhm.
and you start allowing the schools to get away with it, or even in the courtrooms now, sometimes you wonder, are they judging me for what I look like, or are they judging me for the crime? This is important things. How am I going to be sentenced? Am I going to be sentenced because I'm this color, or because they don't like what I look like, or am I going to be sentenced because of the case, because of the case that I'm writing on? So what's happened is we have never had anyone that has wanted to take this and respond. You've got to have responsibility at the end of the game. Somebody's got to be responsible. And when you don't have that, nobody calls that a crime, because it is a crime, then we just continue and it keeps broad. Just look at the schools.
Yeah, just to give a sense of perspective. So, fortunately, the Supreme Court several years ago ruled finally that affirmative action, as it's called, as a euphemism in higher education, is unconstitutional. But it's important to focus on a couple of stats from that case. They found the evidence at trial showed that if you were an Asian American applicant, you had the rough equivalent likelihood of being accepted based on someone from another race who had an SAT score out of a 1,600-point test that would be 400 points less, so a quarter less. If you were in the top 10% academically, your likelihood of getting in was equal to that of a Black student in the bottom 50%.
Wow.
That's an unacceptable outcome, because what it teaches people is that you're not going to get ahead based on hard work. You're going to get ahead based on something else. And I think what the really pernicious aspect of this ideology is, of this kind of diversity for its own sake, climate alarmism, radical gender ideology, is that it prevents us as a society from discussing what the real problems are and how best to solve them. So if you distract and focus on, well, this objective metric of standardized test is not resulting in an exactly proportionate outcome, then the test is racist. If you're telling people to become a cop and you're not ending up with the exact proportionate outcome equal to the population, then the test is racist. Well, when you actually look at it, in the 1960s, the Black marital rate was higher than what it is today.
Yep.
In fact, in the 20 years prior to passage of the Civil Rights Act, the Black middle class was growing faster than what it did in the subsequent 20 years. And today, if you look at a chart of just charting educational outcome relative to marital status, there's a direct relationship between them, and it crosses every race, every ethnicity, Asian, white, Hispanic, it does not matter. The greater the decrease in your nuclear family, the lack of fathers in the home,
Amen.
is your likelihood of having a higher income and educational outcome. But if we don't get to the root problem, which is the breakdown of the nuclear family and a failure of our K-12 education system, then we're going to continue fighting about not having an exact proportion outcome, when in fact we should be addressing our energy at focusing on saving the nuclear family, getting fathers involved in their kids' lives, making sure that both parents are involved in their kids to raise them in a healthy, stable home, and making sure that we actually have our K-12 education system teaching kids how to do reading, writing, arithmetic, the proper contextual history of this country, rather than these crazy, radical, divisive ideologies. And if we do that, then we will teach people that if you work hard, you can succeed on your own merit. You don't need to play a victimhood card.
I'm so glad you mentioned that. It's common sense, but it's not so common anymore. And I'm going to go deep, because you mentioned about the root cause of it. And I think it's by design. The sinister agenda 40, 50 years ago that we're seeing the fruit of it has been implemented while we were asleep as a society. And my opinion is the cultural Marxism root cause of a lot of these issues. And you mentioned about your father came here to get away from that caste system. When the society is divided, it's easier to control the people.
100%.
So that's what they did in India. That's what they did, the Communist Party in China, because they just look a little bit different in different countries. In China, it is the wealthy against the poor, the class struggle, right? And so in the United States, they had to kind of repackage that. And so we're seeing the race wars, right? The racial wars against one another.
Yeah.
And now we're seeing the LGBT wars against one another. It's to divide us, with the ideologies. And so when we're focused on those things, rather than, wait a minute, the root cause of it, the nuclear family being broken, because they're telling you, do whatever pleases you.
Mhm.
We don't need a father and a mother in the home to raise children, which is the most ideal, healthy environment for children to be raised in. We see the breakdown of society, and we see how people are easier to be controlled and triggered. And we see the outrage. All of a sudden, they're on the streets protesting something. They don't understand what it is, right? We're in the click-based society and social media. So I think enough people like yourself leading the charge and say, enough is enough, because there's so much that we have in common that we can work together rather than fighting all day long, every day on those things that are not solving problems.
And it's not to say that people can't have loving, successful families that look different than a traditional.
Right.
Of course you can. Of course you can be a wildly successful if you're a single mom or a single dad. We all know people in our lives who have been incredibly successful. It's just like what you said, common sense. It is simply to state a basic principle. Anybody who's been at home knows how difficult it is to raise kids. How can you? It's easier with two people in the house than it is with one. And to provide that supervision and discipline, and it manifests itself in real discernible outcomes. This is not just a talking point. There's something in the sociology field. It's called the success sequence. And it's well documented. But if you do these 4 things and you do them in order, your likelihood of being in poverty is significantly reduced. If you graduate high school, you get married, you get a job, you get married, and then you have children, your likelihood of ending up in poverty declines by over 80%. That is the greatest economic welfare program imaginable. And it just requires common sense to tell people what we all know intuitively to be true. But like what you said, common sense isn't so common, and we just have to have the backbone and courage and people who are willing to fight on behalf of that, to say, no, you're correct to know that, be confident, have the courage to state it publicly so that we can shift this, ship back onto course.
And Sanjay, I want to say one more thing, that one thing we're missing in our country is God. God, we're a Judeo-Christian country. Yeah. And people have forgotten that. And our schools forgot it. They took, I remember when I went to private school all my life. I never went to a public school. Don't know what a public school's all about. But even in our private schools, the first thing we always did was the Pledge of Allegiance and a prayer. And it was non-denominational, because I was Jewish. Sometimes I went to Jewish schools. My mother was a World War vet. My father was a vet. So I've been to military school. But we always had that inside of our heart. We were thankful to God for whatever we had. We love God tremendously. But today, we don't have that. We don't have that in schools. In schools, they teach you how to use the phone and how to use anything else. But there's no insight, no sense of purpose, and you're growing up. We also have forgotten that our young people that we're raising, they don't really have any reason to come home to. Honestly, how many kids rather go somewhere else and come home? Because there's either a parent missing, or there's 2 parents missing, or they're coming home to some other kind of project. So we forgot that, I know people would say, you would have dinner at 6 o'clock with your kids, you'd have an hour with your kids, and you don't do that anymore. You don't see them anymore.
We need to have a society and encourage and cultivate it where people are taught that they have a sense of purpose in life. That begins in school, and then also encourage more expressions of family and celebrate that. Like when you see people like, this is like one of the neat aspects of having JD Vance as a vice president with a young family, is you get to see someone in public life who very prominently brings his kids along to every event.
And his wife.
And his lovely wife, Usha, just to show that you can be successful, you can serve publicly, but even in private life, in your work, in your profession. And your kids are just as much a part of that as everything else. Being part of a family, that's the basic critical building block of any society. It's a stable family. That's the initial form of self-governance. And if we can save that, then that's how you build a self-governing nation again, where we do have a sense of purpose, a sense of belonging, where we're not going to lash out at our community members based on perceived differences, but that we understand that at some principle, we all share basic values in common. We may have political disagreements, of course.
Well,
We'll
that's it.
disagree about the level of taxes or particular issue. Exactly. But at the end of the day, we all share a common set of principles upon which this country was founded. That's how we can reduce the anger,
Yes.
reduce the division, and bring back a sense of purpose in this country.
And you're the first person that mentions meritocracy, which I've never heard other people talk about. And I think more people need to start that conversation. And can you share with us your advocacy effort through Color Us United? Is that one of the places that you are involved in?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a board member of a group called Color Us United. So Kenny Shue started it, his good friend, and Chris Rufo is a fellow board member. But we just advocate in favor of meritocracy in education. Obviously, we had a legal victory with Students for Fair Admission against Harvard. That's been good. But just because you have a Supreme Court ruling doesn't automatically mean that people will change on a dime. You still see a number of schools still try to implement this diversity type agenda, rather than judging students on the basis of merit. You've had, in fact, in Frisco a couple years back before the school board, I don't know what they ended up doing with it, but to give you an example, they had, and this has happened not just in Frisco, but in a couple school districts across North Texas, they had their students participate in something called the Privilege Walk.
Privilege walk, yes.
Which for your listeners is basically they line everybody up in a row, and basically it's degrees of victimhood. They say that if you're white, or you're a male, you get to take a step forward.
Wow.
If you're Asian, or you're Black, or you're Jewish or Muslim, you take a step backward.
Wow.
Imagine the level of self-loathing that these kids, middle school, high school kids, you've been friends with these people since you were a child. And now some adult is telling you that the rest of society views them or you as better than or worse than someone on the basis of something that is entirely out of your control. We think that these are ideas that are just in Berkeley, California, or some radical, or Portland, or no, they're prescribed countrywide, including here in Texas. And that's just a simple example of how pernicious these ideologies are. They teach people, they indoctrinate them to think lesser or higher of themselves based on something that we would never judge them worse or less than. I was talking with one of the audience members outside about his participation in a Martin Luther King festival in Carrollton. And he fought against that. He sacrificed his life fighting for the principle that we would be judged not based on the color of our skin, but rather by the content of our character. What a beautiful message, what a uniting principle for us to have.
And I think people talk about it, but they don't follow the rule. And this is some of the things that happens in our country. One of the other things is we have to have the rule of law.
Yes.
Which we have neglected tremendously in our country. The rule of law has, we look the other way in many instances.
There's different sets of law.
This is different sets of law. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to step on this, but immigration is one of the biggest rule of law. And we have neglected to look at it in the way it's supposed to be. And now we're paying, look at what's happening right now. We've got a governor, we've got state senators that are flying to another country to bring this an illegal that's not from this country. And on top of that, he's a criminal, supposedly, and we don't even take care of our own here in our country. What has happened to our country?
It can't be the case that you can have one administration or across administrations open the floodgates to have no due process to enter our country illegally, make baseless claims for asylum on some alleged persecution based on some characteristic that will never be proven. Have 80% of those cases actually end up in a deportation order. Meanwhile, those people are allowed to stay in the country, get a J1, allowed to work as a work visa. So then they can settle down, get roots here, potentially have children here, which historically has been considered an American citizen by birth. I disagree with that. I agree with President Trump's interpretation of the 14th Amendment, and I think it's worth litigating this in the Supreme Court.
I think so too.
That can't be the standard by then to say that we can't then deport these people And now we need individualized due process for every single one of the 20 to
Oh my
30
God.
million people in this country here illegally.
Well, they're flooring the code. What's happening is they're doing this to floor the courts with all these criminal cases.
Yeah.
And then what happens? Our president is put against the wall. He cannot move.
Yeah.
And this is what's happening.
Yeah.
And this is where our society has come to come to the bottom of the line.
And Americans, we are kind-hearted. We're the most generous
Too
people.
kind-hearted.
We're the most generous by all available metrics. We donate the most amount of money, the most amount of time. A lot of that is hereditary due to our kind of religious foundation, the principle of giving back.
Judeo-Christian.
This country was founded on, I'm a Hindu, but this country was founded on Judeo-Christian principles.
Welcome.
And there's no disputing that. And so that kind of ethos has led itself to being a very generous and compassionate country. And to be fair, if any one of us, and I certainly speak for myself, but I think I can speak for everyone up here, that if we lived in Ecuador in utter poverty, we would do everything in our power to come to this country and whatever we could, but we would do it legally.
That's right.
And I would expect the country that I was asking to be entered, to permission to enter, to also follow the law. That's the problem. By over tilting towards compassion at the expense of rule of law, you've undermined the entire system of the rule of law. You've encouraged more illegal entrants, and it also provides an ethos that if you're going to pull over an American citizen for speeding 5 miles over the speed limit, but you're not gonna check who's coming in through the back door. It's an inequitable treatment that leads a lot of people to question, well, what if you're going to give them this opportunity, why should I follow the law? I'm a law-abiding American citizen. I pay my tax on time. You're going to give these people free public education. You're going to pay for free healthcare because most of them are not going to have insurance.
Absolutely.
You're going to let them use the public services, the roads. You're going to have an increase in low-skilled labor, which is going to depress wages for working class Americans. You're going to substitute away from their jobs. You're going to drive up the cost of middle and low income housing for working class folks. Look at the damage that it causes, and it causes a society-wide step away from the rule of law. And that's unacceptable. We have to enforce the law. People who are here in this country illegally have to be deported, follow the rules, get in line. And like we said earlier, this is one of the most welcoming and generous countries. If you follow that process, you agree to come here legally and you assimilate, you'll be treated as an equal, but you got to do it the right way.
Well, let me tell you, this is not our country suffering, but it's happening in England tremendously. England has changed tremendously. It's now, they don't even know the rule of the law. It is absolutely overloaded with people from other countries without any documentation. Yeah. And it's becoming a very serious issue. And they can't do anything about it because of you have such a tremendous breakthrough of the country. Yeah. Well, it's going to happen to us. It's happening to us. That's here. Right. And I am so glad that President Trump is taking, and I know that a lot of people hate him or love him, but I want to tell you, he's about the rule of law. And when we follow the rule of the law, we either become good friends or we become enemies. Yeah. What you mentioned is kind of multiculturalism is not a good thing. No. You want people to have their different cultures but come here. We're a melting pot. But the part about the melting pot is that you have to agree with the founding principles of this country. It's fine. And I love celebrating our cultural holidays and going to different religious events. And those are all that's what makes America amazing. That's what makes this a fantastic place to live. But at the end of the day, you have to agree with the principles of the country you're asking to come into. You can't be asking for a separate set of legal principles to apply to you that doesn't apply to all of your fellow neighbors in that country. If you think the country is so bad, then leave. Nobody told you to come here and try to tell us how we should live our lives. We're inviting you into our country. You're a guest. Come here the right way, believe in what we have. And then bring your cultural aspects and share them with us. Bring your Mexican food, bring the Italian food, bring the things that make everything fantastic. So we can experience other people's backgrounds. But at the end of the day, you have to agree with what it means to be an American, because we don't have a hyphenated society. We have an American culture. All American. One of the biggest aggravations that I have is you come here and then you don't assimilate, and then you start bringing all this flag, the Mexican flags and all this stuff. You don't want to take from our country. We want to bring from. No, this is where we are. And if we like our country. We got the flags. We got everything. Then go back. Go back to where you came from. Yeah. because our country has given you everything.
Right.
And that just infuriates me when I see, and I go down Harry Heights and I saw this flags, from other countries and are selling cars in my country. And where's my flag of the United States and Texas? These are things that I find that are very insensitive to me. But now I'm going to go to one bigger subject here. I'm going to take you to another world. Sharia law. What have you heard about this? Have you know what's going on in
Epic City. Are you referring to Epic City?
Epic City
Near Collin County.
Yeah, no, I've read the reports about what's the planned development of Epic, right, in Josephine, Texas.
Josephine, right? It's Josephine next to Lucas and all that area. Governor, has been made a praise about this because we are not great. I mean, that's something else that we have to look at. Bring in another law from another world.
That's right.
So because you're so smart, I'm listening to you here, and I think you're something outstanding candidate. What are your thoughts about this?
So in this country, we have religious freedom and religious expression, and there are millions of hardworking, devout Muslims who agree with the principles of the country, but that's not what's at issue with this planned Epic development.
That's what I want to hear from you.
I think the main concern here has been whether or not this planned development is going to be judged exclusively for people of a particular faith, which would be a violation of our laws, whether they're trying to implement a separate court system or laws that are only for people of a particular faith based on Sharia compliance, which again would be a violation of our principles. And I think it's important to investigate if this is a planned community, really what are they trying to accomplish? Because you can build a mosque, you can build a synagogue, you can build a temple, and they already exist. But kind of what is the purpose of this community, and are any federal or state laws being violated, for instance, that would exclude people of other faiths, or that would teach people only one ideology that's in contravention of the laws of this country. So I think it's important that we investigate and get to the bottom.
Oh, yes, from what I have heard, they have made their agenda clear to the purpose of the development. And there are various lawsuits going on, and the governor is very much aware of in the area of discrimination, in the area of funeral services, the protocol that is against state law or certain ordinances. And so I think there are a lot of elected officials are very concerned with religious freedom in mind, because we all honor that, and that's what we have in this country is the freedom of worship. And so I think at the end of the day, everybody's just watching it and making sure those who are involved and the leadership and the corporations with this project to know that we are very concerned, and we're watching this development should they proceed with the plan and vision that they have expressed to their community. I've heard, rumors, nothing is confirmed, but what happened in Minnesota with a certain districts that's overtaken by the community, they would like to build that with enough constituents and voters to, put that their representation to Washington, D.C., that type of thing. That is made known out there. That's really concerning.
Yeah, no, I think it's important that there's a spotlight on it to make sure that they're not trying to create some extrajudicial or extra cultural system there that's outside this country's prerogatives. And the First Amendment, freedom of speech, and expression of religion, we all support that. It's really making sure that they're not trying to create a separate city or district there that exists under some artificial set of rules, which is being imported rather than the laws that apply to everyone else in the state.
The article I read yesterday was a lot of concern was the Sharia, follow the Sharia law, which is a very, very hard, that has nothing to do with our country at all. We don't have that kind of law.
Right.
That was one of the articles I was reading. I understand the governor is very concerned about this, and I think that's something that we need to keep attention with. But my concern is it's right in Plano area, Plano, St. Josephine, and all those areas. That why are the cities not, or why are we not paying more attention to to the development of it.
Yeah.
Because I understand it has already progressed and it's very vocal.
Mhm.
So where are we standing at? Are these things that are going to start popping up? And how does our state take in all this? Because we cannot see that. You know, I don't mind, you know, I'm Jewish, so we have our synagogues and here, you know, there's mosques, and I appreciate that. But when we start talking about the law,
Right.
Sharia law is very hard.
Mhm.
I've read all about it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you have.
No, there are separate divorce procedures and things like that.
You
that
stone
exist.
a woman for, you know, a man looks at a woman looks at a man, then you can be stoned to death.
Yeah, what we
you know?
can't have is a separate set.
Separate
We can't.
law.
We
We
can't have
cannot.
separate set of rules
Rules.
ostensibly being applied to just residents
Just
of one
resident-
area,
Yes.
because that will immediately divide our society. Whoever exists there, free to worship however you like.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
But
That's not
you
a
have-
point. Yeah.
But there cannot be any separate set of rules for the people there that everyone else doesn't abide by. And so there are
I'm
meaningful
glad you're
consequences
very
of that.
good.
Yeah.
I'm so glad. I'm glad the governor's paying attention and our
Yes.
attorney general. is
I think
very
everyone should be.
Yes, I
concerned
think
about that.
I think our mayors should be. They're the first ones to be. You
Mhm.
know, everything starts at home.
Right.
So home is your city, and
Yeah.
and your mayor and your city councilor should be
Yeah.
the very first ones to be involved.
I think one of the issues that I have spoken to some of the community leaders on that project is that the development leadership, they targeted the ETJ. And so the ETJ has a lot of more freedom outside the municipal ordinances and control. And so a lot of times that's what they do. And it makes it a sticky situation
Mhm.
for those municipal leaders to get involved or intervene.
I
What
see.
do you think?
I saw you, it seems like you may know a little bit more about the
Okay.
circumstance than I'm aware of as to how the development has kind of gone along, but I think I think we absolutely have a right to kind of know and understand what the idea is and what's going on there
Yeah.
to make sure that our laws are being followed.
Well, let me ask you a little question here. What are you going to do when you grow up?
You know, I've always wanted to give back and serve publicly. I feel fortunate in the opportunities that I've been given, and you know, God willing, if there's an opportunity to serve in a different capacity, to have an articulate, you know, person who espouses and really believes and has lived the values of this country, then God willing, you know, I'd love to proceed with that opportunity and see where it takes me. So hopefully this won't be the last time that I'm on your show.
Well, I want to tell you, no, you won't be the last time because I'm very impressed on your conversation and your knowledge, and that's so important. And not only the knowledge that you have of the U.S., but also of India, which is a good friend of our country,
Mhm.
and other societies, and that's important to me because it seems like you are aware of the other people in itself. And I love the involvement you have on this particular Color Us United, advocating for a race-blind America. Well, you know, when I grew up, I grew up in a military home with my mother, but she always told me everything, you know, when you stand in a courtroom, it's blind, you know, the justice is blind.
Mhm. Supposed to be.
And I think we need to get back to that. And I
Yeah.
love the advocating for a race-blind America. And I think the day that we get to that, we would go back to what our founders really were looking. That's how they built this country.
Yeah.
We had the greatest founders, and people don't realize, yeah, they might have all been white, okay? But they gave their life to make this possibility for all of us to be right here.
America is
Unique.
the arc of history bends towards justice. The founding fathers were incredible. They were 20 to 30-year-old young men.
Young man.
Who believed in something new. It had never been created before. This country that had a foundational belief in God, but where people would have freedom of speech, expression, the right to self-defense, due process, equal protection of law. And it was an idea. And it is not an argument to say that those individuals were imperfect individually. Yes, many of them owned slaves. They eventually passed bans on importing slaves through 1820, but that doesn't mean they were perfect. But the ideas that they believed in were good. They were just. This country fought a war in the 1860s to end the vestiges of slavery. We have fought time and time again in the 1960s to pass sweeping civil rights legislation to bring about a more equal and just society. That's the arc of history that we have. It's our calling that we bring that about. And we owe an immense debt of gratitude to the giants who came before us. This is still the path that we still have to chart before us.
Amen on that. They put their lives in jeopardy.
Mm-hmm.
And they've suffered a lot
Yeah.
to make this country what it is today.
Mhm.
And I think it's up to all of us to keep this country going.
That's right.
And it's up to us to be sure that we pray for our president, who is trying so hard to take the ugly and make it good,
Mhm.
because he has got a big mission, and he's doing it for the love of the country, because he loves this country tremendously. And I want to say that I'm very impressed with you today, and I'm very excited that if you do run, I'd like to know where you're going to be so that we can watch you, because you're really very impressive.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much for
Very-
having me.
very
It's been a real
knowledgeable,
pleasure
very
and
knowledgeable.
privilege. Yes.
Well, we're coming to pretty much at the end of our show, and I'd like to give you an opportunity to tell us what we can expect from you in the future. And I hope that you come back again and do a second show when you are elected, if you are. But what is your plans?
It still remains to be seen. I would love to, I'm looking at different offices that may be available to serve in the state or in a federal level. But when I do make that decision, you'll be one of the first people to know. So I appreciate
I hope
it.
so. And I know that Marshall and Len and I were looking forward to being there
Yes,
wherever you
very
are.
much so.
Very much so. We thank you for being here today. It's been an amazing show. I think it's one of my favorite shows, because we get to. I love politics. I love my country, but I also like to learn a little bit more about what other people think of our country, and it's important to me. And I find right now that we're in such a mixture, because we want to do good, and it just seems like the bad keeps opposing. And I'm excited about that judge that just got arrested.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. I can't believe it.
No one is above the law.
No one's above the law, and I think there's going to be more, and I think there's going to be some big surprises coming up on Monday or Tuesday, if anybody's listening. So I'm excited about that. So I'm glad you were here. I'm glad that we were able to take a little bit of the good, the bad, and the ugly as conversations. And I think we need to do it again.
Sir?
Yes,
Certainly.
absolutely. And I think it's only appropriate, as we're talking about our nation, to wrap it up with the Pledge of Allegiance by the Clark family
That
that
sounds
we have
very
had
wonderful.
for us. But before we go, I do want to read it. Is it okay with you?
Absolutely.
Micah this Old Testament, Micah chapter 6, verse 8 says, "He has shown you, O man, what is good, and what does the Lord require of you, but to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God." And mercy and justice, I think we need that more than ever over our nation and the world. And so thank you so much for being here, Sanjay. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
And Sanjay, if anybody wants to get hold of you, how can they get hold of you?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm on all the social media platforms. YouTube, it's at Sanjay Narayan, SN. Got some videos up there. And then also on X at Sanjay Narayan, SanjayNarayan. Forward to here.
And you can follow me at Alexandra and Friends or alexandraventure.com. And thank you, Elena. What about you? How
Thank
can
you,
get hold of
ElenaGlassman.media, tour tasting.
Thank you. We'll see you on our next show. Thank you for being here today. And we're looking forward to our next May 3rd show. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend.